The watch to me is, and I'm not saying it because I'm a watch nerd, the perfect collectible for the 21st century.
Welcome now to the English version of our talk. We are very happy that we have Aurel Bacs with us again, and also Mrs. Dörte Herold, which is this watch specialist in our business. Aurel Bacs is almost not necessary to introduce because he's himself a living legend, and we are very happy, and I'm pleased to say that we have said it already in the German edition. We are long-time friends and we are long-time professionals. And I think that this is important for the watch industry, that they know that they can rely for old and for new watches on people which are passing the time. I mean, we are there almost since our childhood, and I have been born into a family where we always were talking watches. Aurel was more or less the same. His parents are very charming people, which I would love to see more often now that we have no more too many bourses in Switzerland, which are open to the public because also of COVID. I don't see them very often anymore, but we hope that everybody is going well. And I just want to say it is important that also collectors need to have a perspective. Normal people, they just buy a watch because they want to know the time. But collectors are there because they believe in something, which is that the watch is something that they don't change like a shirt or like underwear. It's something they want to possess, and they don't want, in many cases, to share. Even some men don't like to give the car to their wives, but this is something perhaps which is also not anymore up to date. But for me, it is important that we have Aurel here to give us some ideas. What are the collectors of tomorrow? We said before that they are younger than the people we had in the 80s and 90s, but what is it aside the fact that the watches have continuously grown in value? I think aside real estate, you can almost not do better investments, perhaps gold at some times, but that is more a safe haven currency. Watches are something you can use every day. You have a utility that makes you happy, and it is something that speaks about you as well as about the factory that made the watch. Can you give us an idea what your experience is with collectors in the last few years, and why is it that the watches only know one direction in value, going up and up and up? Please, aside that you are a very good auctioneer, of course.
Well, you already mentioned what the reality is today, and I don't have a scientific formula to explain every result at an auction for a important or vintage Rolex or Patek Philippe. But let us quickly look at today's society. Today you can buy a number of mobile phones in the shop, and if you and I would all pull out our phones, we would probably all have the same model.
At least the inside in the
maybe even the outside. The only thing that's maybe different is the box
design,
outside.
That's right, yeah.
Then the same for so many other things we use. I mean, every young man, there's like 5 fashion brands, and they all have these kind of uniforms. Now, sometimes you buy something from a Swedish group where you buy 5 t-shirts for 9 francs 90, or you have these sneakers that are just so streamlined. So what I do believe is that we're looking for individuality. We want to be somewhere ourselves. Mm-hmm. And our parents and grandparents were different because the furniture that was passed from one generation to another made that your home looked unique. Mm-hmm. Today, whether it's a Swedish group or an Italian group, you decorate your house and very likely you have the same furniture that your friend, same car, everything is gray or black. So that need for content. You mentioned storytelling. I don't personally like the word storytelling because it's not that I'm telling you a fairy tale.
No,
it's content.
Content.
In German,
Facts.
Inhalt.
Yes.
Inhalt.
Facts and figures.
And our vintage or our contemporary collector's watches have content, whereas the mass-produced white t-shirt or hoodie that you're wearing today, I don't think it has much content. It may look cool, but it does not talk about craftsmanship, about heritage, know-how. And we should not underestimate Generation X, Y, and Z. They are extremely savvy when it comes to content. So they like family heirloom. They like craftsmen. They even visit, more than our parents did, the factories, the watch manufacturers, and look over the shoulders of a watchmaker to see how a watch is built. What we have is also, in German, die Wegwerfgesellschaft. That means the society that buys, uses it, and it's normal that after 6 months we throw it away.
Of course.
That is very different to our grandparents who bought a watch with their first promotion or for their wedding and kept it until the end of their life. You didn't buy, throw. And that's what they're missing. And this is what they're looking for. So normally, of course, also vintage cars can give you that. But it's so much more of a storage issue, maintenance, license plates to have 10 vintage cars than 10 vintage watches. The watch to me is, and I'm not saying it because I'm a watch nerd, the perfect collectible for the 21st century. Why? We live, and this is proven, on smaller and smaller surface than our grandparents. Our grandparents lived maybe in a larger house in the countryside, maybe even 2 or 3 generations under the same roof. Now we're all going into these mega cities, whether it's Manhattan, Los Angeles, and China, cities with 20 million people. But a family with 2 children lives in the size of this room here on 20, 30, 40 square meters. Second, we travel so much more, except in COVID times, that we are separated from our paintings at home, from the vintage furniture at home, and from the old car that we have saved for. The watch can travel with us. It can come with us. It's the only work of art that comes with us. 3, in a time when you have social envy, I regret it does exist.
Yeah.
There is nothing more discreet than just to have your vintage watch under the cuff. It's much more discreet than having your big flashy car outside that may or may not get jealous looks. So I think the watch as an object is a perfect 21st century object. It has content, it has user friendliness, it has a story, it is discreet, it doesn't give you a headache for storage. What more can you ask for?
That's absolutely right. Well, thank you for that very interesting explanation. I now have something which also unifies us in a way, because we are thinking ahead also of time. And it is always like my father said in the past, while there is something new presented before in the Basel Fair, now World Fair, perhaps in the future in Geneva, when it is possible again, there were things which my father always said, oh, I just go down in the museum and I can see what they announce as a world premiere or the first time show. We always have had it also in the museum. So nothing can really be invented for design. Of course, for mechanism, for patents of technology, we still see every day big improvements with the watch companies. But here I have 2 examples. You can see it afterwards in a close shot of watches from Patek Philippe. One is original from the year 1938. And people always think today that a watch needs to have a crocodile strap or an alligator leather band, which is not true at all. Originally, the watches were all delivered with simple leather belts made out of calf or of even pork, whatever. But it was not the case that the watches were so shiny. And it is very impressive that you have brought us a very beautiful watch. The watch probably, I would guess, is the nicest one that was designed in the 20th century, the Patek Philippe chronograph 2499. In this case, even a watch that has been assigned Beyer as a retailer. And especially is that I was already in the business when this watch was sold in 1984. And it was a customer bought it, and he has kept it all his life. And now, obviously, since he has passed away, it is now offered for auction for the first time. But what I like about this watch is that Aurel also is not like the brands today, going back to the roots, authentically putting it with a leather strap as it should have been made of, when it makes reference to this reference 130, which was made in 1938. Of course, already in 1984, this watch was coming with a crocodile strap, but we think, especially also because we are environmentally and we are also thinking about the animals, it would be fine and very good if in the future the watch companies are going back to the roots and make again watches with more ecological bands, such as these here. And I'm very proud that we always think that it is not good enough just to follow what the brands do, but also give our comments and our critics in a constructive way when they can make it a bit better. So is that also what you think, or is it that you do it this way because you are persuaded also of what I said now?
I think there's a couple of reasons why I personally like these plain stitched, not even too bombé as they used to be in the 1990s when everything was like really round and thick. So a plain leather, I think, is more casual. And we spoke about it before in the German version, that everyone is going gradually more casual. It doesn't mean you have to dress poorly, but it's less formal. It's no longer double-breasted suit and tie and hat and umbrella and coats. For a few, of course, yes. But I think we are going, I mean, remember when Casual Friday was introduced? And that watch de-dramatizes the watch and makes it younger. Good. Second, we use these calf leather straps as often as we can because they don't give you the same headache when you ship them around the world.
Of course, today we see this.
The CITES is a international agreement. Switzerland is part of this that has agreed to ban the international trafficking of alligator, of certain lizards, and therefore we basically fit these watches with calf leather straps, and they can easily be sent to London, New York, Hong Kong, to our offices for exhibitions, but also after the auction directly to the client without us having to remove the strap. Okay. So there's plenty of good reasons to do that. It started probably by looking at vintage black and white photographs from old Rolex catalogs and old Patek Philippe catalogs. And very much where we believe that they had shiny alligator straps, the vintage watches often came with suede leather or calf leather. And then also here with the horizontal stitching. That is,
very nice.
As the same is with your 130, the case.
Perfect. Well, thank you also for the demos. What do you think? Do you have also add on something to that? You are also following the trends. If the customers ask now for new things, or they say, can I have a modern strap? I know people like from the famous TV series in America that have on all their watches now rubber bracelets, which can also be attractive to make the now and past effect. What do you think about that? Is it okay if people make whatever they like to make, or is it that you have to follow a historical way of making restoration all the time?
It's two groups of people. Some are very traditionalist and they want to have the watch as the manufacturer says it should be. But then, as we talked about individuality already, that a lot of people are hip and modern and like to experiment with either the material of the bracelet or with the color, which I personally really like, because you can put very nice accents to a watch in, for example, putting a red bracelet or leather strap on a alarm clock where you have a red arrow showing the alarm, and so to have this highlighted, or some other detail of a watch that you find again then on the color of the bracelet. I think this is an absolutely awesome thing, and with the vintage pieces that we are selling, we once in a while try. Sometimes we are very successful. Sometimes people just frown and say, can I have the black or the brown bracelet on it? And then we change it back to normal. But I think it's always very nice to have something flashy.
I mean, one of the greatest misconceptions, I believe, from novice watch collectors, they come to our exhibitions, they look at a watch and say, I love that, but I'm not going to buy it. Why not? Because I don't like the brown strap.
Yeah.
And they don't realize that the strap is like a tie. You choose it to fit for your taste and to match it. And you can ask my wife, I have probably 100 straps at home, and I do nothing more with pleasure. And whereas some do yoga, I change straps on my watches on a Sunday. And you look at the same watch with a different strap, it looks like a different watch. So actually, it's the cheapest way to get the feeling of owning a new watch, when in fact you only change the strap. It's like when you feel new in new clothes.
Absolutely. You know, that was funny. Once in the museum, we thought, okay, we have not made many special exhibitions a year, because for any reason, we only had 1 or 2 exhibitions, which normally we try to have 3 or 4. And then the lady in the museum came with the idea, I will turn all the watches 180 degrees around their own X. And then people came in and said, is that a new museum? Why did you change the watches? I loved it so much. But it was just, we showed the backside, because many watches have very attractive backsides, especially the enameled one. And it was very interesting how people were reacting, very surprised. But then at the end, they were happy that it was still the old piece they knew, but it was shown not just from its photographical side, but also from the behind. And of course, we are like car dealers. A car without checking out the motor would never be a serious thing. So we always want, and we are watchmakers, we have in our house 16, I think you also have several ones, and therefore it is good that we have the people that can, if you don't make it ourselves, look for the condition also of the movement, because you don't buy just a watch for the external look, because for the external look you can make a lot of change. You can make the change of the bracelet. In some cases you can even change the dial, but they also make sure that you can always keep the old one. Many watch manufacturers today suggest to you, you give in the old one and they will put you another one on. I am very hard. I say I don't like this policy, because the customer paid for the dial he has on his watch. And if he has an additional one, it should be offered back to the customer. But many companies today consider this is almost something that belongs to them. And I often I recommend to people to make gradual restoration of the dial, then change it as a whole. Now we have another 2 pieces. One is from us. It's a piece that never has been sold. Aurel, I will ask you afterwards the price. This was at the time 380 francs. It's a Rolex Prince, also with signature Beyer Zurich. And we have one of your auction, also a very beautiful watch. Actually, it was a man's watch. I could not believe when I heard it at that time. But I said the bracelet is a little bit long for a lady, but it was obviously when it was made, I think in the 40s, sold as a piece that is made for men. So I pass on the watches to you. Perhaps you can give me an idea. I know it's now not fair to ask an appraisal for this watch, but I think the price that it was costing with 380 francs, we can easily make. So just give us an idea.
Humble profit.
Sorry?
A humble profit you could make.
Humble profit, I know.
So what we have here are basically the two hot sellers from the late 30s and first half of the 1940s. The elegant Prince, and in fact, Prince Brancard was the official name. It's most likely reference 971. We can't even see the reference number because the original Beyer inventory tag is still on the back. This is the original lizard strap, the original gold buckle. Who would have believed that without the Rolex crown, something like this existed? And the watch is exactly in the condition how 3 years ago your ancestor took delivery of that. Condition and originality are the key criteria today. So any model, whether it's a 2499 by Patek Philippe or a Submariner or a Daytona or a Prince, we had 30 years ago a relatively, well, I shouldn't say a non-educated market, but a much more forgiving market. Yeah. Polishing, cleaning, rubbing, reprinting, anything was permitted. But then with the information flow, people realized how tiny the details are and how big the difference in value is afterwards. So there is a gap that widened, and today you can buy a lousy example of this reference by Rolex for maybe 5,000 francs. This could possibly be called the world's best example of that reference, because I can't think of another one in such mint condition. And I wouldn't be surprised that a collector would pay 10 times more than what an average or poor example today would go. Of course, you could have bought Apple shares with the same money 20 years ago, and you would also do really well, or Amazon shares, but you would not have that pleasure that a watch collector has. And the sportier model from the same period is what we call a bubble back. The bubble back was an oyster model. Oyster because it has a screw back. It has a very good crown with a good grip, oyster crown. So it was a I wouldn't say a diver's watch, but a waterproof watch. It was called also the perpetual. So as I shake it a little bit here, you can hear how the rotor goes around. And what is really charming about this, besides its condition, it has a Beyer signature on the dial. It has a two-tone Art Deco-ish design on the dial, beautiful luminous hour markers, and that is a very sweet watch offering great value today, as I think we offer it for 5,000 francs in 10 days at auction, and it's a piece of history. So you win in terms of who's got the nicer one, the rarer one, your time warp piece. Well, car collectors are the same, this kind of barn find, but yours doesn't even have dust on it. So this is a gorgeous piece, and it's you should be very proud that you have this in your family since, 3 generations?
It must be now 3 generations with the family, but I am now the 8th generation. So I'm more worried that we will fight to get also the second piece, which is still not ours for our collection, because it is part of our history. And I must say, as we work with these companies, both Patek and Rolex, for such a long time together, it would only be correct if we can make it enter our museum. But I don't want now that everybody is going to bid like crazy on these watches, so I stopped to make more publicity. But I know I can really recommend, if you buy a watch, whatever it is, wrist or pocket watch, go to a specialist like Mrs. Harold, which is especially also specialized on jewelry, but she knows a lot about design, why it was made in that time, why there were good and worse qualities to be found in the market because of events. They also had problems such as health problem or economical crisis, but we had 2 wars in the last century that always had also an influence. For instance, gold was not very demanded, so many people even were selling their gold cases and recased the watches only after the wars. But many times the watches were recased in stainless steel, which was also giving a special flavor to the collectors, which now feel, of course, something which never would perhaps be done anymore has been done, because I remember Patek even asked us to send in watches from Eterna and Certina so they can keep their watchmakers in their places instead of having to license them, because they also were positive that one day these problems will go over and they can do business as normal again. And I must say, for me, it is very similar with the time we live through. I think we know we are playing in a niche. We know that today the pre-owned watches represent today a much, much bigger market than what the watch companies can produce every year now. It is esteemed that up to 20 times there are more watches on the second-hand market than is on the first market, which is stores like ours. And this is something, in a way, it makes me a little bit afraid, but that's why you have to know to cherry pick the ones that are really worth to pay, even up, as you said, up to 10 times more than the value of an average watch. And then there are very exceptional watches, as you were mentioning before. But for me, it is important that we can educate the people, either you through your catalogs in the auction house, and we do it with Mrs. Harold and our tradition and our archives in our company. So I would really thank you so much for that you have been here sharing with us your thoughts. And I really must say, I'm feeling very honored to be a friend of Aurel Bacs. I really don't say that to many people, but he's living his friendship every time we meet each other. And of course, I love to share horological know-how with him because he's simply the best in my eyes that you can consult. So I don't want to make any further spots or good talking about him, but he is really, for me, a person that our watch industry can be thankful. And I think we more and more see that also, that the watch brands do understand that it is not a competition for them, but it is a real asset to have also people that take care of the historical background of these kind of brands. I want to thank you again for being my guest, also in English. You did very well, good job. And I want to thank technical people, for the camera people, and also everybody that is listening to this as a podcast or as a video. Thank you so much, and see you hopefully in a good moment again. Bye now.